Hey everyone, welcome to the channel for another Escape from Tarkov video. In this one, I'm going to talk about 3 more budget loadouts that I've been using while doing looting runs and quests in the mid to late game. These loadouts are aimed at mid to late game players who are looking for a kit that will be effective against both scavs and enemy players without spending a fortune. So I focused on some weapons that pack a punch and can work against enemies wearing armor and helmets. For each loadout, I'll go over the individual pieces and where you can find them, and finish each one with a full breakdown of the costs. So with that out of the way, let's talk about these cost-effective mid-game loadouts. For each of these loadouts, I'll be sticking with an armor and med setup that I feel is the most cost-effective for the protection it offers, and it's become the baseline for most of my budget kits. For the armor, I've really grown to love the 6B3TM armored rig, sold by Ragman level 2 for about 47,000 rubles. It offers class 4 armor, repairs surprisingly well, and almost always comes back through insurance because it's so bulky to carry. For the helmet, I use either the SSH steel pot helmet from Ragman level 1, or the Comtax from Ragman level 2. The helmet will protect you from pistols, shotguns, and some rifle rounds, and the high ricochet chance will sometimes save your life from otherwise fatal shots. Both the helmet and the Comtax cost around 18,000 rubles, so it's up to you whether you prefer a bit of added protection or extended hearing range. For the backpack, I generally stick with the Scav backpack from Ragman level 2, because it gives you enough space to make a profit and only costs about 15,000 rubles. Finally, for the meds, I would recommend a car medkit or Salwa, painkillers, and a splint, for a total cost of about 12,000 rubles. You can purchase a car medkit from Therapist level 1 for about 6,000 rubles, but for the same price you can craft a Salwa at the med station from 1 painkillers, 1 bandage, and 1 splint. This gives you twice the healing power for the same price, so I highly recommend crafting some Salwas. Painkillers and a splint are also 2 things you should never enter a raid without, because Tarkov is no fun when your legs are busted, so I include these on every single loadout I make. I'll briefly bring these items up again while breaking down each loadout in the video, but I figured I would go into more detail on why I choose the equipment setup at the start before I get into the individual loadouts. For this first one, I'd like to give a bit of love to the 5.7, which is a surprisingly effective weapon considering it's just a pistol. Unlike most handguns in Escape from Tarkov, the 5.7 fires around with a high muzzle velocity and is quite effective against basic armor and helmets. While shots from the 5.7 won't be going through heavy body armor, they're almost guaranteed to penetrate most of the face shields in the game since they're only class 3 armor, which means that well-placed headshots from this pistol are deadly even to fairly geared players. The reason I call this a looting loadout is because of a few advantages just carrying a pistol gives you. You move considerably faster, and you have an extra free space to store a large weapon if you find it. Moving faster obviously helps you beat other players to the loot spots, and the extra slot for a weapon lets you pick up more items and make more profit from each successful raid. You can purchase the 5.7, the mags, and the ammo I recommend using all from Peacekeeper level 3, with the pistol itself costing about $280 or 30,000 rubles. When I use the 5.7 on a budget setup, I usually just run it bare bones because every attachment you add pushes it a little farther away from the budget territory. However, if you really dislike the default sights on this pistol, you can add the 5.7 RMR mount and an RMR sight instead for about 14,000 rubles. Next, I usually buy 3 spare mags and 100 to 120 rounds of SS-190 or L-191 ammunition. While these say $2 a round from the traders, it's actually more like $1.30. The game just rounds up the displayed number to $2. This should give you enough ammo to hold your own in a fight and score a kill, and you can usually pick up a primary weapon off of your kill to give yourself a better ranged option. To finish this one off, I get a 6B3TM armored rig, steel pot helmet, and scav backpack, as well as the med setup I talked about earlier in the video. When it's all put together, the entire loadout costs just about 150,000 rubles, which you can easily make back in one successful raid if you fill your backpack and both of your empty weapon slots with items you can sell to the traders or on the flea market. This loadout requires a little finesse to play with, but if you're quick and don't pick unnecessary fights, this is a great loadout to rush loot spots while still having a viable weapon to defend yourself at close range. This next loadout uses one of the most feared budget weapons in Escape from Tarkov to create a mid to long range kit that really excels at ambushing other players, dropping them in a few well-placed shots, and upgrading your gear with whatever you can pick off of their cold, dead bodies. The Vepr Hunter, like the Mosin before it, is kind of a polarizing weapon in Escape from Tarkov. It's a cheap, easily attainable, semi-automatic 7.62 rifle, which means it fires rounds that can easily kill fully geared players in just 1 to 2 shots most of the time. While it feels really good to drop a fully kitted player with this thing, on the flip side, it can feel a bit cheap when your 500,000 ruble loadout just gets deleted by a 30,000 ruble rifle. But that's besides the point. And in this video, I'm going to focus on why you should give the Hunter a try. Because the Vepr Hunter is an extremely common weapon for scavs to use, it's very easy to find on the flea market at cheap prices, often 30,000 rubles or even less depending on how many are being sold. It's also sold by Jaeger for about 50,000 rubles, but I would recommend always just buying one cheaper on the flea market. Next, you really only have one modding option on the Hunter, which is the optic. I dislike the default sights on the Hunter, so I add the Cobra reflex sight or the PSO 4x scope from proper level 1, depending on what map I'm going to be playing. The Cobra is a pretty decent little red dot sight for 9,000 rubles, and the PSO is among the cheapest 4x scopes in the game for 18,000 rubles, which can turn this thing into a pretty nice little budget sniper rifle. Next, I usually buy 3 or 4 of the 10 round mags for this rifle, and about 100 rounds of the 7.62x51 M80 ammo. With the recent cost increases to other types of AP ammo, the M80 rounds, in my opinion, have become the most cost-effective bullets to use against armor in the game, giving you the ability to reliably take down players wearing almost any armor combination in the game for about 200 to 250 rubles per bullet. To finish it off, I get the 6B3TM vest, a scav backpack, and again, either the steel pot helmet or a pair of comtacs. On this setup, I usually prefer the comtacs because I'm doing more long-range fighting and ambushing, and I want to hear anyone sneaking up behind me. For the meds, I just stick with the same combo of either a car medkit or Saloa, painkillers, and a splint to cover all my bases. When it's all totaled up, this loadout will run you about 167,000 rubles, or about 175,000 if you want to use the PSO 4x scope. If you want to cut costs, you can run a P.A.K.A. vest and micro rig in place of the 6B3TM, and then pick up armor off of a kill to replace it, which will save you about 20,000 rubles, but also leave you a bit more vulnerable. For this last loadout, I wanted to take a look at the SA-58 and make the argument that it's criminally underrated as a cost-effective mid-game rifle. Because player scavs can spawn with the SA-58 fairly often, the flea market is usually flooded with these rifles for around 50,000 rubles or even less on some days. That means that for about the same price as a Vepr Hunter from Jaeger, you can pick up a rifle that uses the same ammo, takes larger mags, has more customization options, and the ability to fire in full auto when you need it. While it's not exactly easy to control in full auto, if you treat it like a semi-auto rifle that can spray people down at close range only when needed, this thing is extremely effective at taking down whatever you point it at. For my budget SA-58 setup, I run it pretty bare bones with just the minimal attachments I need to get a sight and foregrip onto it. The only part I replace on the rifle is the handguard, which I swap with the universal M-lock handguard, about 5,700 rubles from mechanic level 3. This handguard gives a nice ergonomics boost, but more importantly lets you fit a red dot sight onto the top rail. I generally run the Burris fastfire sight from Peacekeeper level 1, but this handguard can also fit some of the other micro red dot sights like the RMR and Aimpoint T1. Next, I add a 4.1 inch M-lock rail and the Zenit RK0 foregrip, which adds a bit of recoil reduction and ergonomics gains to the rifle for a pretty decent price. That's about it for the weapon modding, so I purchased two 30-round FAL mags and about 120 rounds of 7.62x51 M80 ammo. Including the 20-round mag that comes with the SA-58, this should give you plenty of ammo to tackle a few engagements if you don't spam your shots and waste ammo on full auto. Like the other loadouts, I generally stick with the 6B3TM armored rig, SSH steel helmet, and a scav backpack when I'm trying to run on a budget. I also use the same basic med setup I discussed earlier. In total, this setup costs just over 200,000 rubles if you can find an SA-58 for around 50,000 rubles on the flea market, which you usually can. I wanted to place this one next to the Vepr Hunter loadout to show that for a fairly comparable price, you can put together a kit using what I consider to be a far more versatile weapon that will let you be effective in more situations. Well, that about covers it for this video going over some more budget loadouts, and I hope you have good luck if you try them out, or at the very least, I hope the video gives you some ideas on how you can put together cost-effective kits for your own raids. I'll be streaming more of my progress in the 0.12 patch on Twitch at twitch.tv/jdogthewise, and it'd be great to have you drop by, so I'll leave a link for that down in the description. Thanks for checking out the video. As always, feel free to leave any comments, corrections, or suggestions down below, and until next time, stay safe in Tarkov City.